Welcome to Love Them Tender, where we find the love in big-hearted books, movies, and TV. I am Alexandra Hidalgo, and I am so glad you're here. Two of my favorite shows ever are Gilmore Girls and Veronica Mars. And in this video, I am going to talk about how Rory Gilmore and Veronica Mars were these exceedingly promising, brilliant teens who grew up to have some pretty complicated adult lives. The two shows had their original runs in the early 2000s, and they inspired all sorts of young girls and women and boys who were watching it to be really smart and study very hard and be ambitious and go after your dreams. These two women, Rory Gilmore and Veronica Mars, are iconic, not just in terms of fashion, but also in women who go after what they want and work really hard for what they're looking for. But the worlds that they live in are very, very different. Gilmore Girls is a cozy dramedy set in Stars Hollow, which is the town we all wish we could live in. It's small, it's quirky, it's comforting, it's delightful. And Veronica Mars is a noir set in Neptune, which is also a quirky town, but also a cesspool, as Veronica likes to call it. So both these young women grew up in completely different worlds, literally, because of course your genre is going to set up the world that you live in. But they're very similar in a lot of ways, which I'm going to talk about in this video. And when we first meet Rory, she's 16. When we first meet Veronica, she's 17. And through the hell that is getting your TV show made and then canceled and then rebooted, we get to follow not only Rory and Veronica, but the amazing women who play them, Alexis Bledel and Kristen Bell, as they go from being young girls to being women. And for their characters, the actresses don't actually have the same ages as their characters. We follow Rory from the time she's 16 and Veronica from the time that she's 17. And at the end of the shows, they're both 32. So we get to see both these women grow up, the actresses and the characters. And at least for the characters, it turns out that growing up is pretty complicated, and that the brilliant, promising girls that we all fell in love with had a hard time growing up, which makes them, of course, very compelling and relatable to watch. Rory Gilmore and Veronica Mars are both raised by very charming single parents, and those parents aren't just their best friends, but the girls are basically carbon copies of these two people in very different ways. Our original Gilmore girl is Lorelai Gilmore, played by the incomparable Lauren Graham, and the way that Amy Sherman-Palladino, the creator, pitched the show was simply a mother and a daughter who are best friends. And the greatest delight of the show is watching these two women banter. They're only 16 years apart, so they are very similar in their dating, and they wear the same clothes, and they find themselves in very similar situations. And that's what propels the show forward at its core. When it comes to Veronica Mars, she is exactly like her dad, Keith Mars, played by Enrico Colantoni, a man who used to be the sheriff. He has lost that job, so now he's a PI, and she is a PI too. They have this deep professional link. Keith really marks who she is. She wants to be like him. He is somebody who is always ahead of the game, who is brilliant, who is honest, an honest PI, Neptune and noir. It defines her identity as much as Lorelai defines Rory. And they all share with each other references many of them obscure, to things that one's like, what? And inside jokes, and they do funny little voices. These two pairs of parent and child express intimacy, that true intimacy that we all long for, through this way of speaking and these jokes that create the world within which our two young women grow up, and that shield them from the darker undertones of life, because they have an incredible parent that they really connect with, guiding them and loving them and accepting them. Veronica and Rory are both exceptional students. They have the brains and they have the work ethic. And yet, they both find themselves as pariahs in their respective schools. Because Gilmore Girls is a dramedy, the thing that makes her a pariah is simply that she is new to Chilton, a fancy private school, at the beginning of the year, and she doesn't quite understand the rules and regulations of how to be a snobby student. But also Paris, Liza Weil, she's so great and terrifying and uptight, decides that Rory could be a threat to Paris's reign as valedictorian, smartest woman in the school. And that sets off a really complicated rivalry between them that leads to eventually Paris becoming one of Rory's greatest and most faithful friends. But Veronica lives in a noir, so the ways in which she's an outcast in Neptune High, her school, are a lot darker. In the pilot, we learned that she used to be one of the popular girls. She was dating Duncan Kane, Teddy Dunn, and she was best friends with his sister, Lily Kane, Amanda Seyfried. However, Lily was murdered, and Duncan wanted nothing to do with Veronica for reasons she doesn't quite understand. She was also raped at a party, and she doesn't remember it, but whatever she did made everybody decide that she is a bad person. And she's now completely alone in her high school while mourning her best friend's death. So when we meet her, even though she used to be one of the popular girls, she is completely an outsider, and she remains that way throughout her whole career. Unlike Rory, who in her comfortable universe eventually gets to belong, Veronica never does. Because as a noir protagonist, there's something of the loner to her, and she will forever have to carry that. So here again, we have two young women who are very similar in terms of their brains and their ambitions, but because of the worlds they inhabit, due to the genres they live in, their lives are very, very different. Even if they're both very, very funny, both shows are hilarious. So it's not about how much you laugh, but it's about how our protagonists get treated and the kind of conflicts they must face, which again are both isolation and rejection from peers, but it's a much harder hill if you're in a noir than it is if you're in a dramedy. Throughout the duration of the shows, Rory and Veronica juggle various sustained love triangles that sometimes become love squares with very handsome men. And that's one of the great appeals of them as characters and of their stories. And both of them have first loves that are very sweet and kind. For Rory, is Dean, the ever tall and handsome Jared Padalecki. And for Veronica is the also very handsome, yet not as tall, Teddy Dunn. And these are boys who are head over heels in love with our girls. And at their core, they are good men, except that our girls are into something else, something a little spicier or more thorny and complicated. So here come our other parade of gentlemen for Rory, and these are the only two that are left in the running because in A Year in the Life, Dean went off and had a bunch of kids and a happy marriage. So forget Dean. We're still debating whether she was going to end up with Jess, played like the most amazing of bad boys by Ventimiglia, or if she's going to end up with Logan, our wealthy version of bad boys, who is played by Matt Shuri. I am Team Jess. Not always, because he was not great to her as a teenager, but as adults, I'm on Team Jess, so come at it. And then for Veronica, she's got two bad boys to choose from, including Leo, Max Greenfield, who's 20 when they first hook up, when she's 17. Oops, see, that's bad boy, that's kind of creepy, right? But as he grows up, that difference disappears, and he is always there. He works for the FBI the last time we see him in season 4, and he has sort of the path that Veronica wishes she had but didn't have. So he's very appealing. And then unapologetically, from the beginning, Team Logan for me. We have Logan, played by Jason Dohring, who just gets better and better with each season. And he, unlike the other bad boys, is the reformed bad boy. They exist. By season 4, our Logan reforms. Even by the movie, the man has reformed. So he's retained a lot of the fire that he used to have, but he's also now somebody who's a viable partner. Rory and Veronica spend the whole time we're with them juggling the affections of more than one, certainly, of these men and other men. There's others, I didn't get into them. And they struggle to choose for a sustained period of time. They choose for a while and then they waver because each one of them gives them something they need, but none of them seem to give them everything they need. Even though these are women who seemingly have it all going for them, there's still some conflicts inside them that don't allow them to settle down. And one of the best things that happened for me when I was watching Veronica Mars was that in season 3, suddenly we have Matt Shuri, Rory's Logan, playing the fake brother to Jason Dohring's Logan Eccles, Veronica's Logan. And they have this whole episode. He turns out to be pretending to be his brother. He's a Vanity Fair journalist, and of course Veronica busts him. But it was great to see the two Logans of two of my favorite girls being there and doing their thing. It was one of those great gifts for people who love both shows. So if you haven't seen that episode or you haven't rewatched it in a while, go check it out. It's really, really fun. Now, if they ever do a Gilmore Girls, we need Jason Dohring to show up and have a little moment with somebody in Stars Hollow, and then we'll really have completed it. Rory Gilmore's and Veronica Mars's lives are completely shaped by class struggles. Because Rory lives in a cozy dramedy, her class struggles have to do with having to navigate the fact that her mother, her favorite person, grew up with a lot of money and gave it up for a middle-class existence, while her grandparents have all the money. And not only do both of these sets of people push her in their own directions, wanting her to either be completely happy with the middle-class life or be overjoyed with having all the money. But she herself has that inside her. She's very much attracted to the money and to men with money, Logan. But she also doesn't want to betray her mother by moving in that direction. So it's an internal conflict between having a nice middle-class existence or having a ridiculous amount of money and living within those spaces. For Veronica, who lives in a noir, she is inhabiting a town, a school, a world in which the differences between money and poverty are extreme, and they create all sorts of violence, not necessarily directed at her, but in crimes that she will then have to solve. So she's often finding herself at the center of murders and robberies and beatings that are a result of the class struggle. But she too has an internal class struggle, because when her dad was sheriff, she used to hang out with the wealthy kids, and she got used to it a little bit. And throughout most of her dating life, she keeps falling for men that have a lot of money, because it's part of what she fell in love with at the beginning, or because she's attracted to money, I don't know. But she is in imbalanced relationships through most of the story, because she and her dad are often struggling to pay the bills, and yet the men that she's with have all the money in the world. So here again, where our two women live really shapes the way that they deal with the conflicts that they're faced with. So if you had to pick a world, I'd pick the dramedy, but they both make for amazing, amazing TV and incredible conflict. When we meet Rory and Veronica again after many years, and they're both in their very early 30s, we find that these two women who had Ivy League educations, Rory went to Yale and Veronica went to Stanford and Columbia, are pretty much doing the same things they were doing in high school. Veronica became a lawyer, but she didn't use her degree, and Rory was always dreaming of becoming a journalist, and yes, she had a talk of the town piece on the New Yorker, but there hasn't been much that has happened with her career, because journalism is in a difficult spot these days, and it's hard to get things published. And Veronica decided that she was going to do nothing with her law degree. She was going to continue to work at Mars Investigations with her dad, just like in high school, except that now she has her own office. It's an interesting thing about TV, because you get canceled by, well, sometimes you get canceled by the audiences. In this case, they got canceled by the execs. And then your poor showrunners manage to bring you back, and then they have to figure out what to do with you. And it's hard, because if everything is working perfectly, then why are we back here? We are in it for the conflict when we watch a story. But also there has to be a familiarity between the show as it was, the show that we loved when these were women in their early 20s, and the show that you're presenting us with again. That puts our showrunners in a very tough spot, and in this case, they chose to give them exactly the same jobs and aspirations that had worked so well at the beginning. But it does feel like these women who had so much potential are stuck. And yet, I think when you're in your 30s, sometimes you do have that kind of crisis where you seemed like you were going to take over the world, and then you didn't, and you just have the same job as everybody else. And I think that's an interesting conflict, even if it feels like a betrayal of who they were as teenagers, and it has upset many, many audience members, particularly on behalf of Rory. All those women who ended up going to Ivy League, inspired by Rory Gilmore, were annoyed to see her running around struggling. But our characters have to suffer for us to go on their journey with them. When we see Rory and Veronica as adults, they aren't just struggling with how to make money professionally. They're also struggling with who they want to be and who they want to be with. Rory is literally homeless in a very chic way, of course. She either stays in Paris's very fancy brownstone, in New York, or she stays with Logan in London in his incredible apartment, or she stays with her mom in Stars Hollow. But she doesn't have a home, and her stuff is all over boxes. She also has a so-called boyfriend named Paul, played by Jack Carpenter, that she always forgets that he's coming to see her, or even that he's there. She's just very lost. And Veronica is doing her work with her dad, fine, but she's also in a long relationship with Logan, and it seems like it's been a happy relationship. But then when he asks her to marry him in the beginning of season 4, she just loses it because she's not ready to commit, and she can't see it as what it is, which is an actual proposal. She sees it as a power play. So both of these women are in that moment where, look, you're 32, it's time to start settling down and growing up, and they can't. Maybe it's because they spent all that time trying to be ahead of the game and being so mature for all those years that now they're like, you know what? No. Or maybe it's simply because they're afraid to grow up, because all of these conflicts that we saw them endure are finally coming to a head, and they're making it very hard for them to make the mature decisions. Or maybe it's just because it's TV and it has to feel familiar, the reboot, and it also has to give us something new. But it frustrated a lot of viewers. For me, it was relatable, but it definitely was almost the opposite of the women that we had grown up with, who were so precocious. And here they're behind. And here, by the way, the noir versus the dramedy doesn't make any difference. They're both equally lost. In their final, at least till now, outings, Rory and Veronica do, of course, have a journey, and they do grow up. At the end of a year in the life, Rory grows up in the most poignant way that she could have. She gets pregnant. By the way, it's Logan's. It's not a secret. It's been out. We've known for a while. And Logan is the one who's the most like Christopher. So she gets pregnant by a man who is very much like her father. And by chance, she happens to be exactly the age her mom was when the original Gilmore Girls began. And this was always how Amy Sherman-Palladino aimed to finish the show. Young Rory was always going to get pregnant. She also, and I don't know if this was Amy's plan or not, finally figures out that she shouldn't be a journalist, that what she should do is write Gilmore Girls. And we know that is a hell of a book because we're all in love with the show. So Rory, who lives in her dramedy, got what I would argue is a wonderful ending for her. Now Veronica, in season 4, gets the worst ending because her noir world turns a lot darker. The crimes that she's working through become much worse, but also because she finally, as the season ends, figures out that of course she wants to be with Logan. Of course she's madly in love with him, and she is ready to settle down, and she marries him. And on the very day of her wedding, he gets killed by a bomb that is directed at her, and that if she had been more careful, she would have realized had been in her car, and it would not have killed him. So, because Veronica lives in a noir, the moment she realizes exactly what she wants, she loses it. I know there's a lot of frustration with a year in the life because of tone, because a lot of the choices that were made. But if you notice, there's always a desire, a hope that we will get more Gilmore Girls. We all want to meet Rory's baby, and we want to find out what's happening with Lorelai and with Luke and with Emily, with all of them. But there's not a lot of clamor for more Veronica Mars, because as much as we loved her, it's hard to imagine how that story moves forward. But that's TV for you. And I'm still glad we got to spend that journey with both of them. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know, do you agree? Do you disagree? What do you think about these two women and how they grow up? And of course, I always want to know which team you're on for each one of them. Who is the man that you see them with? And please comment, like, share, and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. Love Them Tender's reluctant cinematographer is my husband, Nathaniel Buller, and our social media managers are Lana Elsahemi and Anna Radzinski. Thank you for watching, and as always, stay big-hearted.